Hello. My ex-wife falsely accused me of cheating, married her affair partner just 3 months after our divorce, and my parents believed her lies and cut me out of the family. I'm a 42-year-old guy, and I used to be married to a woman named Shannon. Looking back, I can only describe her as completely unpredictable. She almost tore my life apart and left my reputation in shambles. When I first met her, though, I was young, naive, and convinced she was exactly what I had been looking for in a partner. We met on a blind date set up by some mutual friends, and honestly, I was captivated. There was something about the way she spoke, how she carried herself, and the energy she brought into a room that completely drew me in. As much as I fell head over heels for Shannon right from the start, it didn't take long to realize she didn't feel the same way. She was upfront about it too, straightforward and unapologetically honest. She told me outright that she wasn't romantically interested in me. Sure, it stung, but I appreciated her being clear about where she stood. Over the following months, even though Shannon didn't see me as anything more than a friend, we stayed in touch. Our social circles overlapped, so we'd often bump into each other at parties or get-togethers with friends. During these interactions, I made it a point to respect her boundaries. I treated her like any other acquaintance, polite, friendly, and never pushy. I wanted her to feel at ease around me, and I worked hard to make sure there was no pressure or awkwardness between us. One night at a party, Shannon had a bit too much to drink. She was clearly in no state to take care of herself, and I knew I had to step in. I called a cab, helped her into it, and made sure she got home safely. The next day, she reached out to thank me for looking out for her and, more importantly, for respecting her when she was vulnerable. I think that moment marked a shift in how she saw me, though I didn't fully realize it at the time. Months passed, and our friendship continued. Then one day, I casually mentioned in our friend group that I needed a +1 for an upcoming work party. I wasn't making a big deal out of it, it was just a chance to enjoy free food, drinks, and some company. Most of my co-workers were either married or coupled up, and I didn't want to show up alone. To my surprise, Shannon volunteered to go with me. I was caught off guard but genuinely happy about her offer, so we made plans. When the night of the party came, I picked her up, and from the moment we arrived, something felt different. There was this sense of ease between us that hadn't been there before. Shannon seemed more relaxed, more open, and genuinely happy to be there with me. I kept the evening light and easygoing, steering clear of anything that might come across as flirty. I didn't want to ruin the newfound comfort between us. But to my surprise, the night turned out to be full of laughter and meaningful conversation. She seemed to enjoy herself so much that by the end of the night, she invited me back to her place. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't want to rush into something without knowing it was real. So, I politely declined, wanting to let things happen naturally, if they were meant to. The very next day, Shannon sent me a text. She confessed that over the past few weeks, her feelings for me had started to change. She said my kindness, respect, and how I'd always treated her like a true gentleman had made her see me in a new light. Shannon admitted she regretted rejecting me after our first date and wished she had given me a chance back then. She asked if I could consider giving her another shot, now that she realized how she really felt. It was a lot to process, completely out of the blue. But deep down, I knew my feelings for her hadn't changed. So, when she asked for another chance, I said yes without hesitation. That's how we ended up going on a second date, and from there, things just clicked. What started as an unexpected second chance turned into something far more serious. I fell hard for Shannon, so much so that I couldn't see the cracks forming in our relationship. After dating for about 1.5 years, we decided to move in together. Honestly, it felt like the logical next step since we were already spending most nights at each other's places. With both our leases ending around the same time, we thought, why not just find a place that's ours? It sounded simple enough, but that decision opened a door to parts of Shannon's personality I hadn't fully grasped. From the start, Shannon's tastes were extravagant. She loved anything that screamed luxury, even if it came with a price tag well beyond her means. I'd always known she had a thing for the finer things, but it became impossible to ignore once we started looking for apartments. She zeroed in on high-end places, rooftop pools, doormen, the whole 9 yards, places I knew she couldn't afford. When I gently pointed this out, she didn't take it well. Instead, she argued that since I made more money, it was only fair I cover most of the rent, 70% to be exact. I should have seen that as a massive warning sign. We clearly had very different views on money and responsibility. But back then, I was too infatuated with her to question it. I told myself, she's worth it. I'll make it work, and ended up agreeing to pay the lion's share just to keep her happy. Moving in together brought new challenges. Shannon had strong opinions about everything, especially the decor. When I brought over my furniture, she didn't just dislike it, she trashed it. "This stuff is so old and ugly," she said, pointing to my vintage coffee table, a piece I'd had for years and loved. "Why don't we just throw it out?" I tried to explain that some of the pieces had sentimental value, but she wasn't having it. To her, my furniture was an eyesore, and she didn't want it ruining her vision for our home. The more we argued, the more I realized she wasn't going to compromise. In the end, I gave in just to avoid another fight. Most of my things ended up shoved into my tiny study or storage, where she didn't have to see them. Looking back, this was the moment I started noticing how controlling Shannon could be. Before, I'd written it off as her being particular or strong-willed. But now, it was clear everything had to be her way. From the start of our relationship, I had always been the one footing most of the bills, dates, vacations, rent, utilities, you name it. I didn't mind at first because I loved Shannon and wanted to make her happy. But deep down, I believed that a relationship should be a partnership, with both of us contributing to build a life together. Shannon had a decent job, and it puzzled me why she suddenly decided it was okay to stop pulling her weight financially. When her excuses started piling up, I had to put my foot down. I told her flat out that if she wasn't willing to pay her share, we'd have no choice but to downsize, break the lease, pack up, and move to a smaller, cheaper place. I knew how much Shannon cared about appearances, and I hoped the idea of looking broke to her friends would snap her out of it. Begrudgingly, she agreed to keep paying her portion of the rent, but that didn't stop the complaints. Over the next few months, she wouldn't let it go. Shannon constantly compared me to her male coworkers, bragging about how they provided for their wives and kids while the women stayed home without lifting a finger. I tried to explain that those situations were different, those women were raising children, not sitting around doing nothing. Shannon wasn't hearing it. She wanted to live the same lifestyle, and when I wouldn't budge, she dragged my mom into it. She vented to my mom like a kid tattling to a teacher, hoping to guilt me into giving her what she wanted. My mom, being more old-fashioned in her views on marriage, immediately took Shannon's side. She told me it was my job as her husband to support her fully if that's what she wanted. Her words hit hard. She couldn't see how much stress it would put on me if Shannon quit her job entirely. I confronted Shannon after that, furious that she'd brought my parents into our argument. During the fight, she let something slip that cut me to my core. In her anger, she admitted she regretted marrying me because I wasn't man enough to provide for her the way she expected. That was the moment it all clicked. Shannon didn't love me for who I was. She loved what I could do for her. After that, things went downhill fast. Shannon stopped speaking to me unless it was absolutely necessary, as though I didn't exist in our home. She withdrew all affection, no dates, no hugs, no intimacy, nothing. She even stopped pitching in around the house, leaving me to do all the chores on top of everything else. It felt like she was trying to punish me for standing my ground. At first, I kept trying to talk to her, hoping we could meet halfway. But every attempt I made was met with cold indifference. Eventually, I gave up. I was drained, emotionally and mentally, from trying to fix something that only one of us seemed to care about. The distance between us grew wider with every passing day. Then, out of nowhere, Shannon quit her job. She didn't consult me, didn't warn me, just walked in one day and announced she was done. That was it. I was furious and told her flat out that if she didn't find another job soon, I'd move out. She broke down crying, telling me how much she hated working and just wanted to be a good wife who stayed home and cared for her husband. Her tears got to me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her take a break, but I made it clear, if I was going to handle all the expenses, she had to take over the household responsibilities. She promised she would, but deep down, I already knew how this was going to go. And, sure enough, nothing changed. Shannon spent her days playing video games or binge-watching TV in bed. She'd occasionally pick up around the house, but for the most part, I was still doing all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry, just like before. Whenever I called her out on it, she'd get defensive, snapping at me and accusing me of nagging her. As time went on, she became more withdrawn, losing herself in her online gaming community. Hours would pass with her glued to her computer or phone, chatting with people I didn't know. Even when we were in the same room, it felt like I wasn't there. Her phone became her world, her eyes fixed on the screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It was clear she cared more about those online connections than the person sitting right in front of her. It was like a knife to the heart every time I saw her smile or heard her laugh while glued to her phone. Those moments used to be mine, shared between us when we were happy. Now, it was as though I had ceased to exist in her world. The house felt colder, lonelier, even though we lived under the same roof. At the same time, the financial strain was starting to crush me. I was paying for everything: rent, utilities, groceries, and dipping into my savings just to keep us afloat. Every paycheck vanished as soon as it hit my account, and the constant worry of what if loomed over me like a storm cloud. What if I lost my job? What if an emergency came up? There was no backup plan, no safety net, just me scrambling to keep everything from collapsing. What hurt even more was that my parents, who knew about our situation, didn't offer a single word of advice or support. It felt like I was carrying this unbearable weight alone, with no one in my corner. Then, one afternoon, I stumbled upon something that shattered the last pieces of my marriage. I was going through our phone bill, just a routine check to make sure the charges were accurate, when I noticed an odd pattern on Shannon's account. There were repeated calls to the same number, sometimes late at night, sometimes during the day when I was at work. Curious, I asked her about it. "Whose number is this?" I said, holding up the bill. She barely looked up from her game, rolling her eyes. "Oh, that's Jacob. He's someone I met online." My stomach dropped. "And what exactly is your relationship with him?" Her response was so nonchalant it made my head spin. "I don't know. Maybe we're just friends. Maybe he wants it to be something more. Who cares?" For a second, I thought she might be joking. But then she added, almost casually, "I do like him. We talk a lot, and it's nice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands shook as I grabbed her phone and scrolled through her messages. The things I read made me feel sick to my stomach. The texts between Shannon and this man weren't just casual, they were explicit, graphic, and filled with details about our lives that she had shared with him. One message in particular burned itself into my mind. She had told Jacob that she had fallen out of love with me but was sticking around because I was her safe option and her cash cow. She even bragged about how easy her life was, lounging at home while I worked myself to the bone to keep us afloat. Jacob, in turn, mocked me. He called me a nerdy pushover who deserved to serve her. The audacity of their conversations left me in shock. I snapped pictures of the messages, needing proof of what I'd uncovered. When I looked up at Shannon, she didn't even seem fazed. There wasn't an ounce of guilt in her eyes. That was the moment I knew it was over. To her, I wasn't a husband, a partner, or even a person. I was just a means to an end, a tool to fund her life while she entertained herself elsewhere. I told her right then and there that I wanted a divorce. She laughed in my face. "Divorce? That's not happening," she said smugly. Then, with a twisted smile, she suggested we open our marriage instead. "Maybe that'll make it easier for you to deal with this." I refused outright and told her she needed to move out immediately since I was the one paying for everything. That's when her demeanor changed. She wasn't going to give up her cushy setup without a fight. Shannon started yelling, throwing every insult she could think of, and then, as if on cue, she called my parents. She put on an Oscar-worthy performance, crying and begging them for help. But instead of admitting what she had done, she spun an elaborate lie, accusing me of being unfaithful. She claimed that I had been cheating on her for months and was now making up stories about her to justify kicking her out. My mom, bless her gullible heart, believed every word. She called me, furious and in tears, accusing me of betraying Shannon. "How could you do this to her? "She's been nothing but kind to you," she yelled. My dad chimed in too, scolding me for letting down such a wonderful woman. I tried to defend myself, to explain what was really happening, but they wouldn't listen. They had already decided I was the villain in Shannon's story. That's when I realized just how deep Shannon's manipulation went. For months, maybe even longer, she had been planting seeds, telling my parents lies about me coming home late, finding lipstick stains on my clothes, and texting some imaginary woman. She had crafted an entire narrative to make herself look like the victim, knowing this day would eventually come. It hit me like a ton of bricks. She had played all of us, using my parents' love for her to turn them against me. I felt utterly betrayed, not just by Shannon but by my own family, who had chosen to believe her over their own son. No matter how much I tried to plead my case with my parents, it was like shouting into a void. I laid everything out for them, the proof of Shannon's cheating, the screenshots of her conversations, her lies, her betrayal, but none of it seemed to matter. My mother insisted that I had fabricated everything, echoing Shannon's claim that I was just trying to cover my own tracks. My dad, on the other hand, said it didn't matter what evidence I had, in his eyes, I had still failed as a husband. To them, Shannon was the perfect victim. The idea that she, a charming, well-spoken woman, could be unfaithful was inconceivable. Instead, they believed there had to be something I had done, something that had driven her into the arms of another man. It didn't matter how much I denied it or how much evidence I provided. They were stuck in her narrative, and there was no pulling them out of it. Despite Shannon's relentless manipulation and the chaos she stirred, we did finally get divorced. It wasn't an easy process, far from it. She fought me tooth and nail, using every trick in the book to try to twist the situation to her advantage. But thankfully, I had a skilled lawyer who gathered every shred of evidence against her. When it all came to light in court, the judge saw the truth. Because of Shannon's blatant infidelity, I didn't have to pay her a single cent in alimony. Even with the divorce behind me, the damage she caused lingered. My parents refused to let go of their misguided belief in her version of events. Despite the court ruling, they continued to insist that I must have been at fault, that I had done something to push her away. Every conversation turned into an argument, and every family gathering felt like I was stepping into enemy territory. Over time, the strain became unbearable. My parents started to distance themselves from me, and I, in turn, began pulling away from them. I felt isolated, cut off not only from the family I grew up with but also from the life I had once imagined for myself. And yet, Shannon wasn't done with her antics. Even after the divorce, she kept in touch with my parents, feeding them more of her lies and using their sympathy to maintain a foothold in my life. The final blow came just 3 months after the divorce was finalized when Shannon gleefully announced her engagement to Jacob, the very man she had cheated on me with. I couldn't believe it. The audacity of her actions floored me, but what hurt more than anything was my mother's reaction. She decided to attend Shannon's wedding. When I confronted her, asking why she would support someone who had torn my life apart, her response cut me deeply. She said Shannon had personally asked her to be there since she didn't have any family of her own, and my mother felt obligated to show up as a gesture of kindness. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My own mother was willing to support the woman who had lied to her, manipulated her, and destroyed my marriage. That betrayal hurt more than anything Shannon had ever done. In the aftermath of everything, I realized I couldn't keep carrying the weight of what had happened. I turned to therapy to help me untangle the mess of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and guilt that had consumed me. It wasn't an overnight fix, and there were plenty of days when I felt like I was making no progress at all. But over time, therapy helped me see that what happened wasn't my fault. I learned to stop blaming myself and, more importantly, to let go of the anger that was eating me alive. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life. Now, I'm in a much better place. I landed a new job that not only pays better but also gives me a fresh start. I managed to pay off all the debts that had piled up during my marriage, and I moved to a new city, a place that feels like a clean slate, far away from the ghosts of my past. As for my parents, I've gone low contact with them. It's not easy, but I've realized that protecting my peace is more important than clinging to relationships that bring nothing but negativity. Shannon, on the other hand, is nothing more than a distant memory. I don't think about her or wonder what she's up to anymore. The anger and pain have been replaced by a sense of peace, and for that, I'm grateful. About a year and a half ago, I met Kylie. She's everything I could have ever hoped for: beautiful, honest, independent, and incredibly kind. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm building a healthy, loving relationship with someone who truly values me for who I am, not for what I can provide. Looking back, I see everything I went through as a painful but necessary chapter of my life. It taught me resilience, self-worth, and the importance of surrounding myself with people who genuinely care about me. While I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, I can honestly say I'm stronger for having come out the other side. From the very beginning, it was clear that Kylie and I were meant for each other. We shared so many common interests and values that every moment spent with her felt effortless and joyful. After everything I had been through with Shannon, I never thought I'd have another shot at love, let alone find someone who would completely redefine what love meant to me. But here I am, and I'm grateful every single day that Kylie came into my life. Kylie doesn't just love me, she inspires me to be a better man. She accepts me for who I am, without ever asking me to change. Being with her has been a healing experience in so many ways, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm living the life I was always meant to have. Just a month ago, Kylie and I received the most incredible news: we're expecting a baby. When she told me, I was over the moon. It felt surreal, like the beginning of a new chapter that I had been dreaming of for so long. The excitement was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop imagining the future we were about to build together. Then, a week ago, I took the biggest leap of faith I've ever taken. I proposed to her. I got down on one knee, heart pounding, and when she said yes, tears of joy streamed down my face. In that moment, all the pain, heartbreak, and struggles from my past seemed to melt away. It felt like everything I had endured had led me to this perfect moment. Since our engagement, Kylie and her sister have been diving headfirst into wedding planning, brimming with excitement. But this morning, something unexpected happened. I got a call from my mom. It caught me off guard since we hadn't spoken in months. She hesitated at first, then asked if it was true that I was engaged. Apparently, some of her friends had seen Kylie's social media post about our engagement, complete with a picture of her beautiful ring. I confirmed it, keeping my tone neutral. Then she asked why I hadn't shared the news directly with her and my dad. I couldn't help but scoff. I told her, honestly, that given the state of our relationship, I didn't feel compelled to include them in significant moments of my life anymore. That answer clearly upset her. She pressed on, asking if they would at least be invited to the wedding. Her reasoning? People might talk if we're not there. I laughed at the absurdity of her concern and told her flatly that Kylie and I didn't care what people thought. More importantly, I didn't want them there at all. That's when the conversation took a turn. She began cussing me out, calling me selfish and ungrateful. It was the same old guilt trip she'd always used, but this time, it didn't work. To be honest, I knew this was coming. My parents had never taken the initiative to meet Kylie, even though they knew we were dating. They still blamed me for my divorce and, as far as I know, are still in contact with Shannon. The very thought of having them at my wedding, bringing their negativity and possibly sabotaging one of the happiest days of my life, was out of the question. But the drama didn't stop there. A few days later, Kylie showed me a message she had received on social media from my mother. In it, my mom accused Kylie of alienating me from the family. She wrote that Kylie didn't deserve to be my wife because wives are supposed to bond families together, not tear them apart. She even compared Kylie to Shannon, saying Shannon had always been close to her and my dad, while Kylie hadn't even tried to ask for their blessings. Seeing that message made my blood boil. I immediately called my mom and told her to stay out of my life. I reminded her that Shannon was a manipulative liar who had used everyone around her, including my parents, and that I was done trying to convince them otherwise. My mom didn't back down. She said she still saw Shannon as her daughter and missed who I used to be before my divorce. I told her bluntly that the man I used to be, the naive fool who let himself be taken advantage of, was gone, and I was glad for it. She then tried to bargain. If I was really determined to marry Kylie, she said, she and my dad might consider giving us their blessings, but only if I invited them to the wedding. That was the last straw. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that I was done trying to explain myself. From that day forward, I would be cutting both her and my dad out of my life permanently. I told her she could continue to think of Shannon as her daughter because I was no longer her son. She tried to argue, but I hung up. Kylie and I have since blocked my parents on all our socials and phones, and honestly, I feel at peace with that decision. Fast forward to today, Kylie and I are now married. We had an intimate ceremony surrounded by close family and friends who truly love and support us. My parents weren't there, but Kylie's parents were, and they couldn't have been happier for us. The day was perfect, free of drama, and exactly how we wanted it to be. Right now, I'm writing this from our honeymoon. In just a few weeks, we'll be announcing our pregnancy to our closest friends and family. For the first time in my life, I feel truly happy and at peace. I'm looking forward to becoming a father and building a beautiful life with my wife and our baby. The past may have been painful, but it's behind me now. My focus is on my new family and the future we're creating together.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.